If you've watched this podcast, you've heard me talk about working for the oldest civil rights organization in the country. But it's not often that I actually get to have someone who is a civil rights expert and also who's a law expert and can really speak to the Black experience in America, policing, and so many other amazing things. Today, I have just that. Welcome back to the Cleveland Pulse. I am your host, Edwin Hubbard Jr., and I am ecstatic to have and welcome to you Ayesha Bell Hardaway, who is a law professor at Case Western University, who's done so many amazing things in addition to being awarded by the Cleveland branch NAACP. I want to welcome you to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is such an honor and a privilege to be in conversation with you.
You are somebody who I've admired for some time. You have done so much, and I do have a lot of opportunity to talk to attorneys, but not to have an opportunity to specialize in the things that you've specialized in, the things that you've built your career on. So if you could just tell our audience just a little bit about yourself, some of the projects you're working on, the things that you've done throughout your career.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for everything that you're doing in our community. I've seen you work steadfastly over the last several years, and it is really just a privilege and an honor to watch you grow. So we are better as a city because of the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Me. The work that I'm doing is really revolving around social justice, racial justice, thinking about what that means both here locally, but also nationally, and being really mindful of not thinking that there's one answer for all of the things that impact and malign, for lack of a better word, malign our people, right? And so I've been really very fortunate since 2012 to be teaching at the law school at Case Western Reserve, granted full professorship in 2023, and am grateful to occupy a space that allows me to prioritize the needs and the interest of our community while also teaching young people, right? And so when I was a law student at Case Western Reserve University back in the Stone Ages, there were not very many Black professors that were focusing on the things that I was focused on, right? That I went to law school to learn about. And I'll say there were really just two who really focused on civil rights, Jonathan Inton and Chip Carter. It was through my work with Chip Carter that I realized that I actually love research and writing in the legal space, and that I wrote my first article on reparations at a time when nobody thought reparations was relevant, at a time when I was actually being encouraged when I first came back to the law school to not write on the topic, right? Only to know, speaking of the pulse, that the pulse of our community, that had been an ongoing thread, issue, and concern. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote The Case for Reparations in the Atlantic. And then all of a sudden, right, the issue that had been important to me for more than a decade, right, became a mainstream conversation. Since that time, I pivoted into doing work around law enforcement and what community safety really means, specifically here in Cleveland, but have also studied it across the country. And right now, I'm putting a lot of energy and effort in working to exonerate, to secure the liberation, the physical freedom of our brother, Keith Lamar, who is housed at the Ohio State Penitentiary and on death row for over 30 years.
Wow. I do want to talk about him a little bit, but
okay.
I want to step back a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Working for the NAACP, for me, a lot of people don't even understand what civil rights means. Mm-hmm. I believe that I have a firm understanding of it because I was raised in the organization that I work for. But it's become apparent to me that most people don't know what civil rights are because I get so many complaints. I get hundreds of complaints. And as we review complaints, it is apparent that so many of them do not align with who we are as an organization and are not civil rights complaints. So just in a basic sense, to a person is like trying to understand what are civil rights?
Oh, that's a really good question. And without knowing what the complaints are that you're receiving, right? My inclination tells me that they're Black people who have been mistreated, right? And feel like because of whatever their experience is, that they need some sort of relief. I'll say, as you know, right, with the founding of your nation and the establishment of the Legal Defense Fund before it was the Legal Defense Fund, right? Thurgood Marshall and his colleagues were going everywhere addressing issues that Black people found themselves confronted with, right? From death penalty cases to civil suits, right? Anything where it was apparent that it was a high-profile enough issue, right, that he might be able to get some result for folks, right, because they were being mistreated because of the color of their skin. He had a civil practice, right, that if you read his autobiography and other biographies about him that sort of undergird, put the food on the table, right, for his family, right? But the work that he did in community for community was largely not compensated. And so, of course, my inclination is that you're hearing from folks who need that type of relief, maybe not to the extreme, right, as being chased or facing either death by lynching in the town square or death by lynching as a result of a rigged criminal legal system, right? And so that's probably a lot of what you're confronted. I think the definition of civil rights, because of that, can be as expansive as we want or need for it to be, quite honestly, right? What we know often is that civil rights litigation is closely tied to the civil rights protections passed in the 60s, right, in the 50s, late 50s, and throughout the 60s. But of course, right, because of the disproportionate impact of racism and the efforts by a variety of different systems and structures, right, to maintain racial subjugation, right? Black people feel that subjugation in a variety of ways that aren't always aligned with civil rights litigation or legislation, civil rights legislation, right? And so that rub, I imagine, is what you're experiencing and what our people are experiencing. And then the question that I have is, NAACP, of course, cannot fill the gap for all of those grievances, right?
Correct.
And then where can we find relief for folks despite, right? So it just means that we need more support. We need more institutions doing very specific and tailored work, right? That's directly within their wheelhouse, right? That they have capacity and need for, that isn't always just leaning on the traditional model of civil rights that NAACP has been able to carve out for itself over the years, right? Because you've I'm sure by necessity, right, aren't able to follow the original model.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, in so many ways, I think we get Black people to say, I have a problem. Yeah. And the NAACP is the one entity that I know. Yeah. Can I call you? Can you fix my problem? Yeah. Like, what can you do for me? Yeah. And there's an array of problems that we can't always address, but we try hard.
No, I understand. And trust me, I know something about what you're talking about, right? Because I'm a criminal lawyer, right? So I can't help you with your divorce, right? And there are a whole bunch of folks who are really, really concerned about the ways in which they aren't being adequately represented, right? The ways in which the court may be not as friendly or as useful to them as they might imagine that they need to be. And so my goal in that point and in that moment is to think through who's the point person, right? Who can I refer this issue or this concern out to, right? And I'm sure NAACP does a lot of that too.
You actually made a very valid point to me when I think about people who come in complaints and they want to talk to lawyers. And I'm fortunate enough that I do have a lawyer on our team, Angela Groves, who she's going to be on the show here soon, so I'm ecstatic. And she helps us with
one of my faves.
She helps us with some movement lawyering. Yeah. But she can't always speak to some of the other issues that people have. And I get people with no shortage of problems that they have. And I'm often thinking about, where can I send people? When you need help, where can I send them? Yeah. I'm like, I always wonder, was there like the sheet that existed?
Oh, we need a sheet. No, bruh, for real. we absolutely have to have a sheet. It's one of the things that I said to your predecessor, right? It's one of the things that I'll say to you. We absolutely need a sheet. Angela is amazing. She's dynamic. Cleveland is going to be better for her coming back home. I'm so excited that she's here. She's also extremely astute and resourceful.
Yes, she is.
Right? And so because of that, right, I have no confidence that she will develop a process by which you'll be able to have a good referral mechanism.
So she has been awesome.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the continued work that we do here in Cleveland.
Yeah.
We get to kind of see,
Yeah.
what she gets to bring here.
Yeah, and she knows I support her. So any way I can be useful, she knows how to call me.
So to that end, we have a legal redress committee, and we've been really standing up our legal redress committee. So I think, moving forward, that's something that people can really look forward to.
Yeah.
And then another committee that I'm really happy about is that we have a prison branch committee where we have somebody who's really kind of like focusing on some of the things that are happening in local prisons and how we can contribute and help people in that way.
Yeah. There's some really important things happening in that space. Should the NAACP want to be engaged or thoughtful, the House just the week before Thanksgiving passed this law called Andy's Law, purportedly designed to protect the safety of corrections officers after a corrections officer was killed in a mid-level facility. Only as you read the bill, as I'm sure won't surprise you or your listeners, right? There's all sorts of stuff not connected to that aim that actually serves to add additional punishment to folks without justification, not for an infraction. So they have this new category that is not defined by statute and is unclear who it specifically applies to, but a high profile or high security inmate now is going to have access removed from them, the inability to have contact visits with their family and their loved ones. Essentially, the Ohio State Legislature in the House have decided that they want to figure out how to run the prisons as opposed to allowing the wardens or the other appointed officials to do that job. And it's clear from reading this bill that they don't quite understand what it means to run and support a space, a corrections space, which is what we say we're supposed to have, the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, right? In this bill, it says there's no higher ed opportunities available for high security inmates. Like, what? That makes no sense. Like, how do you want to have a space where people are not free to learn and to grow and then think that it's going to be safe for them or for your corrections officers, right? Like those two realities are diametrically opposed to what you say this bill is about. And so we need a lot of advocacy, right? It'll be interesting to see if the Senate picks it up. I'm monitoring it to see where my voice might be useful and will welcome any input from the prison committee, or I think that's what you guys call it, right? From the prison committee as a part of an advocacy in that area.
And so I think you said a couple of interesting things, but something that stands out that's apparent to me is that people have a misunderstanding of who the incarcerated population are. I think we often put them in a box and we condemn them to being a lot worse of individuals than they actually are. And I'm not saying that there are people who are incarcerated who shouldn't be incarcerated, who didn't make mistakes, or who are, maybe they are bad people, but I tend not to carry the belief, I tend to carry the belief that everybody who's incarcerated is not a deviant. And I tend to believe that every one of us is literally one mistake or not even our own mistakes
without a doubt
away from being incarcerated and put in a position where we are now having to fight for our lives every single day.
Without a doubt. I think the current carceral system says so much more about the people on the outside than it does about the people on the inside, right? We are making it very, very clear, like in our effort to dehumanize others and to punish others, we are really, really exposing, I think, an ugly side of our own humanity, right?
What is the benefit of dehumanizing people who are incarcerated?
Well, they're pushed away and they're forgotten. And in a lot of respects, I think the dehumanization allows those that are in power to achieve their aims, which is, number one, to always create a subjugated class. We know, right, when the 13th Amendment was passed, written in it was that slavery could exist in America. It just had to exist under a criminal statute, right? Under a criminal system. And so that's what we have, right? Is an extenuation. I mean, the words are there plain as day. And so before anybody thinks that I'm like, making a leap that is not logical, right? All we have to do is read the actual words and then watch the actions of the folks when emancipation was secured, right? And once that happened, right, now all of a sudden this prison industrial complex, right, is just slavery with another name. There's no doubt about that. The literature, the history, right, the data to support that is well long-standing. And so in many ways, right, it allows the power structure to maintain an underclass, right, free labor. And we know that prisons have for years, decades, a century, right, or more, right, provided free labor from the chain gangs. When I was a kid, we used to see in the South, right, folks on the side of the road working in the chain gangs, right? I now have historical underpinnings and insights to understand what that really meant and what those people were doing, right? To what we know is our prison industrial complex now, where whole communities are being built up and undergirded with deindustrialization, right? With the removal of manufacturing from rural areas and the planting of prisons in those same spaces, where now the whole town works at that facility, right? That is where the money comes into that area. And the people that are being housed there are used for free labor, whether it's in camps, whether it's building furniture. I remember having a conversation with a woman at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Cleveland, and they had some beautiful mahogany furniture in the space. And she looked at me and she said, "Isn't this wonderful? This is what we have our inmates do. Prisoners get to build this furniture." And it was top notch, right? And I said, well, wonderful is one way to think about it. But when you think about the hourly wage that people make, it's $1, less than $2 by statute for decades, right? There's no way, right, that that's a fair exchange, right? That is indeed servitude, right? Uncompensated servitude. The money that's made off of commissary, the money that's made off of the telephones and the tablets, right? All of the money that comes into these facilities, right? It is big business, right? Angela Davis in her book, Are Prisons Obsolete, like really talks about the birth of the prison industrial complex in the state of California. But you could use that model and see it throughout many states, the majority of states in the United States, right? A place to house brown and black people, right? While undergirding both the stock options, the local economy, right, and everything else for these company and corporations that run these places. So I think it's really important for us to be mindful that as we look at our people and blame our people for their conditions, right, that we understand and recognize that there is a system designed for them to be put into those categories, right, into that category, right? And we, in our minds, are trying to rationalize it into something that makes sense without really understanding the history of why it's there and recognizing that it's not for us to blame each other, right, but for us to figure out ways to change the system.
You said a lot, and
I'm so sorry.
No, and I'm so sorry.
That was a long answer.
That you said. So many things come to mind. My initial thoughts is yes, it's wrong. And then I think about, from the vantage point of just being a everyday person and having family members who have been incarcerated or families that comes home. So maybe I'm not desensitized because I've had family members who have been incarcerated have come home. But to the vast majority of people, they look at it like, these people deserve it or they don't. And then they don't know how to work with people once they come home. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about one aspect and maybe then the other. The best way to start to work with people once they come home instead of making them feel ostracized is maybe finding employment, but then there are other things that we need to do and other things that need to be put in place that a society should be doing to welcome back its citizen and to reactivate them as citizens.
Yeah, but there's one thing that I don't want us to get lost in this conversation, and that is the reality that there's something very, very wrong with the criminal legal system, right? Like for our purposes, there's something very, very wrong. It works for other people's purposes, right? But it doesn't work for our purposes because families are being destroyed. Whole communities, right, don't have the benefit of the talents, the brilliance, right, the love that exists when their loved one is locked away, right? And our whole like communal structure, right, is suffering without a doubt, right? Okay, so if we can agree that there's something wrong with how the criminal legal system is impacting our reality as Black people, right, then we have to be willing to dig and to go and understand more, right? I think too often I have had so many conversations with so many well-intentioned people who are educated in one area, right, and are presumed to know so many things in other areas that they don't. And all I would say is I'm encouraging us to go and get the information, for us to be very clear on the ways in which the criminal legal system is leading to a disproportionate incarceration, right, of Black and brown people, not just men, but also women, right? And how we have over time criminalized behavior that Black people have had demonstrated, right, committed, at the exact same rate as white people, yet we are the ones who are locked up, right, in disproportionate amounts. And so if we're able to analyze and really have a good sense for, okay, there's something wrong with this system, right? There's not anything wrong or pathological about our people. There's really something wrong with this system. Once we understand that, then perhaps once we, in the interim, as we are working to correct those problems, perhaps the intervention inside of the system, the way that our loved ones are being treated inside of the system would reflect that understanding and that reality and put us in a better position then to welcome them back, right? So I was doing restorative justice work and training in Oakland, California in October. Had an opportunity to go to Alameda County Juvenile Facility. And those young people, they have a 360-some bed prison, mini prison for young people, right? It was built to house that many young people. Now they're only a total of 52 across all security clearances, right? Security levels in the entire space. Everyone is in school, whether it is in high school, post high school, so college, trade school. Everyone has something to do throughout the day, and they have a humane system by which they get benefits like privileges and the like, right? Learn how to cook on their own, learn how to have fun and play with each other, earn different privileges, right? Back. This is all before they ever are reintroduced back into the community, right? Why don't we think about treating our young people in Cuyahoga County in the same way? Why is that not an option, right? Why is it not an option to think about what it means for somebody who is a high security, whatever that is, high security inmate, right? To have higher education, right? Like the world could open up for folks even within confinement if we were more expansive and humane in our approach to how we treat them on the inside, right? And then have them most equipped to really contribute when they come back home.
So if we are to identify a solution to these problems, is the first focus on legislation or is it on policing?
Oh, can you do both at the same time?
You know what? As much as I would like to say yes, I don't feel like we do two things at the same time.
Well, we should, right?
Should.
Because there are different people doing different things all at the same time, right? And so if we have the will to change, have the will to change across all sectors, right? Have the will to be mindful. And I know in Ohio, we do not have the benefit of any power in Columbus. I get that. I understand and I recognize that. But these issues impact and concern folks regardless of which side of the political spectrum they're on. And if we could start to have a conversation about our humanity instead of our political party, right, then we might understand what it means for the people who are returning to Southern Ohio, Appalachian counties and the like, right? Why it would be really important for them also to have education on the inside, right? But unfortunately, right, we have to be willing to have a bridge, to have that conversation in that space. I also think, there have been a lot of great strides in terms of the awareness of the impact of unconstitutional, dehumanizing policing, right? I hope, Lord, please, I hope we all have that message. I hope folks are not unclear about the tragic impacts of a pathologically violent police structure, right? And if that's true, right, I think there will always be gains to be made, always improvements that we can be mindful of, but we can't lose track, right? We can't lose ground. We have to keep pushing forward into a more progressive understanding of what it means to have community safety, right? Absent a violent police force at the same time.
No, I want to change the speed just a little bit.
I'm sorry. I know I'm talking. I can get going.
And I'm loving it. I want to make sure I get back to the initial project that you talked about with the young man.
Keith Lamar.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So some of my passion as you're hearing about sort of like thinking through how it is that how we treat folks when they're sent away, how we think about folks who are sent away, even how we think about folks as they are going through the criminal legal system, supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But too often, if they look like me and you, are presumed guilty, right? And very rarely proven innocent, right? And that's a real problem, right? That is a real defect in our system. Keith is a Clevelander, a lifelong Clevelander, who found himself locked in Lucasville prison in the early 1990s. In 1993, as I was getting ready to graduate from high school, that Easter, there was a riot in that prison. Keith was in that prison, not a part of the riot, but was in that prison at that time because as a 19-year-old, he is very transparent about the fact that he was on the wrong side of the law, selling drugs. Someone busted into his apartment to rob him, began shooting. He shot back. Would be at any time in history castle doctrine, meaning he had the right to protect himself in his own home, but somehow he was pled to a murder charge in that case, right? Wow. And so as a result of maybe an ill-advised plea, advised by his legal counsel at the time, he finds himself that Easter of 1993 in the Lucasville prison. During his incarceration there is an uprising. And I know you're a baby, so this is before your time. But there was an uprising that I remember being in the news. And as a result of that uprising, several inmates were killed and one guard was killed. Somehow, and Keith does a marvelous job of telling his own story. So folks should go to keithlamar.org. There's an animated film that has gotten awards, including here by G-Cuff, but out in California and other places as well. He has a live band that performs around the world, which he has been performing with them by phone. And we just hosted them at Case Western Reserve. His website, keithlamar.org, tells the whole story. But he literally was just name drawn out of a hat, essentially. 9 aggravated murder charges were placed at his feet. Wow. His position, and if you get to know Keith, you will see he is a very principled, wise, enduring, tenacious, brilliant man. He teaches with me. He teaches with folks at Northwestern. He teaches with folks at Youngstown State, at NYU. He is a brilliant scholar and also principled. And so he says, the things that I've done, I've pled to. I didn't do this. I won't plead. And they tried him because he refused to admit. He could have gotten time served. He could have had it ran concurrent with the time he was already doing, but he knew he had not committed those murders. And as a result, they sentenced him to death. They found him guilty and sentenced him to death. Not with a fair trial. They withheld evidence. And as a result, he's been on death row for more than 30 years.
Wow.
He has a death date of January 13th of 2027, and I'm a part of a legal team working to do everything we can to get justice for Keith.
That sounds like something worthy that people should support.
Yes.
People should look into. If you want to give that information on Keith Lamar one more time.
Absolutely. It's www.keithlamar.org.
All right. I think that's something that people should look into.
Yes, please.
I understand
if folks have questions, they should contact me. If they want to find ways to support, if they want to hear more, if orgs want me to come and share more about who Keith is, if they want to find ways to partner him with young people. I mean, he's doing dynamic work with young people all over the country and has a strong desire to bring a lot of that work back home to Cleveland.
I think, unfortunately, this is the story of so many other Black men throughout time who have been incarcerated and have been forced to plead even when they did not commit a crime to begin with. I'll ask one question, and as we get closer to the end, what would you say to those young people out there who may be listening or maybe not be listening? Maybe a family member is listening, and they have young men who are out in the streets and who are just trying to navigate life. When it comes to the legal system, what would you suggest they learn?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that we have to understand and recognize, and Keith says this best, right? It's all a trap, right? At the point where you are valuing your own life less than the things that you can attain, right? Whether it's cars, money, girls, right? Guys, whatever that is, right? If your life is worth less than what you would do to get those things, right? You got to imbalance. And it's natural, right, in a young mind to not see things as clearly, right? So please, by all means, heed the words of your elders. I tell my kids all the time, there really is a such thing as young and dumb. Now that they're older, they're like, you're right, Mommy, it was a such thing as young and dumb, right? And that's no disrespect to us. We've all been there, right? We've all been there. It's a part of the development. The other thing I would say is do everything you can to get quality legal representation, everything you can to have sound advice, right? To make sure that your rights are being protected and that you aren't being just shuffled through a system with promises that never materialize and only work against your own good. Yeah.
Well, today you dropped some nuggets. I think you give us a lot to think about. As a matter of fact, I feel like this has to be a second segment. There was no way we could get through everything that we talked about today, but you have given much to think about. And I think there's much conversations to be had about what's happening in our community in regards to the legal system and how we as Black people navigate it.
Yeah,
I want to thank you for just taking time to come out and talk to us today. I will be definitely sending you another invite to come and talk to us again in the new year. But I just want to express how fortunate we are to have a person like you in our community and for you to spend the time to give us the knowledge that you have.
Oh, I appreciate you so much. And I look forward to coming back. I really do.
All right. To our listeners out who came in and tuned in today, if I don't hear from you soon or we don't see you soon, do the best you can to take care of yourself. In the meantime, peace.